Well, Mac, we've been talking about the American political shit show for quite a while now, and we've made one notable exception in our podcasts, and we haven't really said much about Justin Trudeau. He's been our prime minister for a while now, and I guess the question is, has sunny ways ended?
Did they ever start?
Well, they seem to. I mean, he had a really high approval rating when he was, he did have a good honeymoon period just because he wasn't Stephen Harper, and everyone was really relieved about that. But I think as Liberals tend to do, they have started to show their true colors as the months have gone on, and the promises have not been fulfilled, etc., etc. So he still has a fairly, I think if an election were called today, they'd still have a majority. But people are, I think, definitely getting a little bit delusioned with Justin Trudeau and the Liberal Party. What do you think?
Geez, I don't know. I mean, as someone who basically lives and breathes disillusionment. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know why people aren't more disappointed or aren't more disillusioned, I guess. But on the other hand, given sort of the state of the world and other politicians, not just Stephen Harper, obviously, other options.
You mean Trump?
Yes, well, we must not say his name, for he may appear. But you got Trump, you got Trudeau, and anyone on Earth, and particularly anyone in Canada, who looks at Trump and says, we could be doing a hell of a lot worse than the guy we got now. I mean, that makes sense to me. But as far as like an active, positive take on him, I just don't really understand why so many people ever had that.
Well, the Liberals always talk the talk, but they never walk the walk. And I mean, to make that point about, if you compare Trudeau to Trump, I was on vacation recently and I ran into a couple of Americans and, a few of them, and every single one of them said like, oh man, you guys are so lucky to have Trudeau. Trump is such a jackass. I would feel so lucky to be a Canadian right now. And I was like, I didn't vote for him. I think he's kind of a pampered rich boy from Ottawa that's kind of out of touch with regular Canadians. I didn't vote for him, but I mean, I didn't really want to rub that in because, I guess it'd be kind of rude because, it would suck to have Trump as your president, but Trudeau is in a lot of ways, in some ways, more conservative than Stephen Harper on some levels. For instance, his economic policies about wanting to enter a lot of private-public partnerships, privatize transportation, ports, airports, that sort of thing, is something that even conservatives wouldn't dream of doing. And so I think that on the surface, the Liberals look really nice. They have their 50-50 men and women, feminist caucus or whatever. It's kind of like what the Liberals always are. It's a capitalism with a human face, with nice values, progressive values, but at the core of it, it's still the same old policies of austerity and right-wing, privatization.
Yeah, a minister of women's affairs who has to justify, cutting funding to women's shelters and the like, that sort of stuff. I guess so. Signal left, turn right is sort of the general trend of things. Also, before Trump came along, he and Obama were sort of seen as cut from the same cloth. Trudeau was the Canadian Obama or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
And for us to still have that person, as I'm sure many Americans wish they still had Obama. In fact, even many of the people who voted for Trump. As it turns out, it's still an appealing idea or a safe place to sort of put your principles, to say that in a world in which really crazy people are getting elected and really bad things happen politically, certainly through most of 2016, Trudeau looks like a nice, stable figure.
Well, yeah, it's like Joe Biden came to visit Justin Trudeau shortly before the inauguration of Trump, and he basically said, it's pretty much up to you in Germany now to lead the free world because, you certainly can't fucking count on us to do that anymore, at least for the next 4 years. And I think that, it's a nice idea, but when you actually look at the core of like what the Liberal Party has typically stood for and what they've done and the kinds of, taxes they've put on working people and the kinds of, cuts to, Jesus, John Chrétien, his government put through massive cuts to education and healthcare, and it's something I think that the Liberals, with their sunny ways veneer, are able to get away with a lot more bullshit than the Conservatives, and the Liberals are a lot more, I guess, media savvy or covert about it. The Conservatives were always so unabashedly conservative, and well, not just that, but I mean, like, hostile towards the media, hostile towards scientists, hostile towards any sort of dissent, whereas the Liberals are okay with all of that, but
they still shut down scientists and still do that, but they talk a lot about how important science is and stuff.
Yeah, and with the case of Trudeau, he'll talk about how much he's a feminist and how much he respects the rights of LGBTQ people, but then he'll go ahead and carry on with an arms shipment to Saudi Arabia, a country that kills gay people and doesn't let women drive cars.
Among many other horrible things. Those are just two of the more well-known ones. But the thing about Trudeau being the Joe Biden appointed, because that's how apparently democracy works, leader of the free world, anointed by Joe himself, to me the question then comes down to a fairly simple one. Is that actually something he's going to do? I mean, a Liberal can say, well, we've got, Germany and Canada, or really Canada as an actual Liberal party, and a nice guy Liberal running it. But it doesn't seem like he's really wants to be the leader of the free world anyway. It's not like he's taking Trump to task on anything.
No.
When they meet, they just do the usual handshaking and trade deal talking point bullshit. And when he's asked by the media about like all the awful shit Trump has said about women and, well, pretty much everybody at this point, Trudeau just sidesteps the whole thing and is like, well, that's just not politics. I'm just not going to address that.
Yeah, basically. Well, he says it's not my position to tell another country what to do, essentially. And this is kind of a throwback.
Then what's the point?
Well, I agree with you, but like back during the campaign, he was asked to call Trump out on a lot of the misogynistic shit he said, and he didn't want to comment because he knew that Trump was quite likely going to be the next leader of the United States.
Well, he's one of the two people who could win.
Yeah,
might as well not criticize both of them.
Yeah, exactly. And so, and from a strategic point of view, I think that was a smart move because now, he's not on record as having called him out or anything. But then it also reveals Trudeau to be kind of spineless
and also useless. I mean, if the goal, never minding the political problems I have with him, which is like he's a liberal, I'm a socialist. We already disagree right there, right? Fine. But even within his own framework, as like a nice guy liberal who wants to sort of be progressive and promote, civil rights and the like, is this not simply feeding into exactly the right-wing mentality? Is his capitulation to Trump, and I do think that that's basically what it is, not simply, doesn't that just legitimize the whole problem? Trump's racist. That's not good. But worse than that, I'd say, are the people like Trudeau who basically just let him be racist. You know
what they say, all it takes for evil to succeed is for good men to do nothing. So that's basically it right there.
And all this talk about like, well, maybe Trudeau isn't calling Trump out for this, but he's playing, this 3D chess game where his real goals are this other thing. And it's like, yeah, I heard that before from the Clinton campaign during the election. How it's like, yeah, they're not going after him hard on this stuff. They're sort of sidling themselves up to him as the racist, bigoted piece of shit that he is, but they won't actually say that to his face. Well, it'll be implied, and we'll get other people to do it for us. And then apparently that wasn't good enough. And I think in the case of Trudeau, whatever the hell it is he thinks he's doing, it's not going to be good enough to even curtail or really do anything regarding Trump. Trump will just do what he wants.
I agree, and I think that how Trudeau handled the whole electoral reform thing is really telling of how easily he will capitulate if it suits his interests at any given time. Like, one of the ways that the Liberals won the election was by outflanking the NDP on the left and regurgitating some NDP policies that NDPers have been advocating for years, like electoral reform, legalization of marijuana, all that sort of stuff. The Liberals were totally okay with electoral reform so long as it was a ranked ballot, because that wouldn't hurt the Liberal parties. I knew that they weren't going to implement electoral reform as soon as I saw them win the majority, because the Liberals and everybody else knows that proportional representation is by far the most desired form of democracy in Canada. If a party gets 15% of the vote, they get 15% of the seats in the House of Commons. Easy, right? It's straightforward and it's simple, and most people that want some sort of electoral reform support that system. But the Liberals don't want that system because it would mean an end to majority governments, right?
Yeah, they would. I mean, in the best case scenario, they probably would be doing worse in the future than they are now, simply by virtue of the fact that I think plenty of people who vote for the Liberals vote for them because they want, the old "don't throw your vote away" kind of logic, which is quite often true. You vote for one of the two biggest parties because one of the two biggest parties is most likely going to win a majority, and when that happens, nothing else matters. But when you have a situation in which, you got like a variety of parties and no one holds an absolute majority unless they get it through votes, then I don't think the Liberals even know how to deal with that sort of thing. I don't think Trudeau would know how to deal with such a world. Ironically, of course, is that they still won the greatest number of votes, and they would still have formed the government. Yeah. He'd still be prime minister now.
Yeah, but he would just have to deal with a lot of inconveniences of dealing with a lot of other parties.
Yeah, like the Conservatives, the NDP, and the Greens.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't like the Green Party, and I'll never vote for them, but I do think that they deserve more seats in Parliament that they currently have. They have a good, it's like, 3 to 5% of people.
Yeah, five, somewhere around there.
Yeah, I mean, it's not very big, but that's still a lot of Canadians that aren't actually getting represented in Parliament very well at all.
But that's where I think the whole issue of stability, like Trudeau is treated as this sort of an anchor for liberal democracy in the world. He now is the champion of it, as so many people have sort of alluded to in the media. And yet, in order to maintain that position, he has to be against democracy, he has to be against reforming our democracy. He has to be willing to do an about-face on a key electoral issue, like one of the things that got his party elected in the first place.
Yep.
He has to be a hypocrite. He has to lie in order to stay in power. And it seems, on the face of it, that would be a bad thing for people. But at least as far as the logic of liberalism goes, it's a good thing because liberal parties mean stability.
Yeah.
We don't get the crazy chaos of Trump's or of other parties that have been elected in Europe. What you get is a guy who can basically stay in power, perhaps for 20 years or more. Who knows? Maybe he'll be in power as long as his dad was. And that will just mean, Canada will be on an even keel for that whole period of time, while the rest of the world is, chaotically democratic.
It's funny, too, because, we were talking about Trudeau is being lauded as one of the few leaders of the free world left. And right now we're talking about a free trade agreement with China. So, I mean, Canada has never been a leading hegemonic power in the world, and we never will be. And so I think that we're still going to be victim to the ebbs and flows and the sways of the way that the global economy works. And right now, there's this sort of contending, this rivalry between America and China. China is growing. They want to sort of usurp America's influence around the world. And honestly, I think that a free trade agreement with China would be probably... I mean, I'm not opposed to reorienting our economy away from America, by all means, but China doesn't exactly have a really good reputation on the world stage of being true to form and honoring whatever agreements they sign. China is in it for China, so...
Well, they're about as bad as the States when it comes to stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly.
But... yeah, they're looking for somewhere else to keep Canada strong and independent and all that sort of, usual nonsense. It is interesting how, when we talk, like when it comes to Trump, Trudeau is fairly ambivalent or whatever. When it comes to internal policies, the sort of the gears of austerity just keep turning under the Liberal government.
Yeah.
And when it comes to other countries, like just foreign affairs in general, it seems that our government is just as unprincipled now as it was under Harper. We will happily sell weapons, like you said, to Saudi Arabia. We'll make trade deals with China. We'll make a deal with anybody if it helps us, if we can, make some money out of it, or think that we can, or screw over the Americans in some way, maybe. But all of that just becomes kind of this, what's the point of having a liberal in power if this is the kind of way they're going to act? Because it seems completely pointless to even care who the prime minister is going to be. If they can lie about democracy, they can ignore, other foreign leaders who are racist or murderers or bigots or any number of things, and will still cut services. What's the bloody point?
Recently, the Trudeau was there was people were calling, I think the NDP in particular, for the minimum wage of federal employees to be raised to $15 an hour. So anyone working for the federal government, not like a nationwide minimum wage, but anyway, Trudeau wouldn't even sign off on that because he said, well, that's not the best way to improve the living standards of working Canadians. We need to do things like tax cuts and grants and credits and, bureaucratic wishy-washy stuff. It's like, no, dude, actually just raising people's wages is literally the best way to improve their standard of living.
Yeah, larger paycheck. Come on.
And the most simple and straightforward. But I think that time and time again, the Liberal Party is consistently against the rights and the interests of working people. They want to play this old politics game of pandering to the middle class and repeating that over and over and over again, when in fact, actually, in 2017, the middle class in Canada is sort of a hollowed out shell or becoming one. And most people that a generation ago considered themselves to be middle class or identify as middle class now identify as working class, and those are actually the kinds of interests that need to be stood up for. And the Liberals have never been on their side, certainly not in this political context and in this neoliberal political context.
Yeah, it is interesting how even the people who would consider themselves middle class are people who are like paying 60% of their paycheck to rent and stuff like that. Like, yeah. I'm middle class, even though almost all my money goes to rent and I live in a little shoebox.
Yeah.
But, I feel like I'm a, up-and-coming urbanite middle-class person or whatever, even if you're basically in a dead-end job doing nothing all day long. There is, however, one thing that they have, at least fairly recently, like a couple days ago, said that they're strictly going to do, a promise they are going to fulfill.
Legalize weed.
Yeah, although by July 1st, 2018, which is odd. An odd date to pick, obviously.
Well, it is a bit far down the road, although, it is a big change.
Well, sure, but they could have started this right away, and it's not a huge change.
The supply chains are already there.
Yeah, the industry's already there. In fact, if anything, the confusion is, their argument is that they wouldn't want to change the way this works because there's a lot of laws that they have to go through first and foremost. However, currently, the most confusion regarding the law is the fact that it's currently illegal, but is legally available everywhere.
Yeah.
That's causing the confusion. Like, the law, as far as, the day-to-day stuff, has already gone well ahead, and the actual, the law regarding the marijuana itself still says it's illegal, but everyone else is acting like it's not.
Well, because it isn't, technically.
Yeah, exactly. So there is there's no, what would change if you were to make it legal tomorrow would be a reduction in legal confusion.
Yeah.
It's not like you need to wait and go, well, I don't know, maybe we should, got to ask all of our people. Like, they're going to do another survey of the police forces again, and the police are going to say what they've been saying for some years, where it's like, yeah, legalize it. It's like a massive waste of our time.
Yeah. Yeah, it could be a lot more...
another fucking review on, the tax income that will come from it?
Yeah, well, I think that Trudeau, I think he wants the government to play a pretty big role in the supply chains and the taxation and whatnot, and the distribution. So I think if they legalized it right now, it would basically just be like privatizing that whole industry, sure. Whereas Trudeau has a lot of, he promised a bunch of money in infrastructure and other spending, and I think that he's eyeing marijuana legalization as a ways to pay for that, which is smart, and it's not off point. But at the current moment, you have people getting arrested and marijuana dispensaries getting raided.
People still going to jail for it.
Yeah, and
Trudeau himself is like, yeah, I smoke pot all the time. Big deal.
Well, he's also said that until such time as we legalize it, the current laws apply. So tough luck. It's like, well, why do you have to be such a massive twat about it? Why can't you just tell the police force to
or
chill
decriminalize it now
in the meantime, and then go? Yeah, sure.
Those are all good ideas.
That would make sense.
Yeah. So July 1st, 2018, recently, the date before then, sometime before then. Now, of course, this all might happen. At the end of the day, the Liberals do have an absolute majority in Parliament, and therefore can easily pass any laws that they want at this point.
Yeah.
However, this was argued for before by Chrétien under the Liberal Party.
Yep.
Back in the day, and he backed off on it because the Americans threatened Canada with trade sanctions at the border.
Right.
That, Canadian trucks would be investigated or searched because marijuana would be on them because now you've legalized it. Now you're a drug-producing country and you're no longer in the drug war. You're on the other side of the drug war, and we now are going to treat you differently. And honestly, that could just as easily happen now, if not more so.
Except now you have a president of the United States that wants to renegotiate NAFTA. So
yeah, and he could just use this as a big, fantastic excuse to be like, well, you're going to be sending our kids drugs. A drug that I think one of his...
Jeff Sessions said it was only slightly less awful than heroin.
Yeah, that's the kind of people who are advising the president of the United States on what marijuana is.
Yeah.
And I mean, I would not at all be surprised if he simply phoned up Trudeau like the day before July 1st, 2018, and just said, you better not, because I will shut the border down.
Yeah.
And we're renegotiating NAFTA. And guess what? Part of NAFTA, we're going to make it enshrined that you not legalize marijuana. Why not? You can do that. You can make any negotiations you want. And considering that Trudeau has yet to stand up to him, I don't see why he would on this point.
Well, okay. And calling back to the whole pivot towards China thing, I think that China wouldn't particularly care if we legalized marijuana or not.
No, I don't know.
And so, I think that, regardless of what you feel about, China or Canada dealing more closely with them, it might just be a thing of necessity that we have to do going forward if we, want to do things like legalize pot and just not want to deal with fucking Trump and the Americans. So... I don't know. There's also the whole fucking C-51 thing that the Liberals haven't done anything about. And I just want to take this moment to be thankful that in Canada, unlike the United States, we don't come up with like a zesty title for all of the laws that we pass and make an acronym and make it stand for the things that the law is supposed to stand for. Like the Make America Great Again Act or fucking whatever. It's like, no, it's just called C-51 or C-52 or C-53, and that's it. If you want to know what's in the bill, read the fucking bill. Done. Yeah. There you go. You don't have to have some, marketing scheme around it. Jesus Christ.
That was like the barbaric acts hotline that the Conservatives tried to start. Yeah. That was an attempt at that, and it went over like a lead balloon.
Mm-hmm. That was so shitty.
Fucking stupid fucking name.
So
stupid fucking idea. People just trolled the shit out of that.
Everything about it was so shitty.
And the worst part was, well, not the worst part, but one of the stupidest parts about that was that they didn't even have like enough phone operators or anything to even deal with phone calls,
let alone the trolls.
Anyway, but C-51, it's still in place. Still, I mean, the problem with things like C-51 is that you don't see them, right? Like, it goes into place and it is, in some way or another, it provides our secret police with some legal covers for actions that would have otherwise been illegal. Being able to investigate without warrants under certain circumstances, or interrogating
eavesdropping
people,
on
eavesdropping.
People, yeah.
Like, it's very vague and confusing, and there's some weird, oversight committee that meets behind closed doors that reviews possible abuses, and it's all very vague and easily abused, essentially. However, for the average person, it's not something you're ever going to experience, you're ever going to know about. And even if you were like, personally, your rights were impacted by this law, there's every possibility that you'd never even know anyway.
That it was that law, yeah.
Yeah, you'd just be like, you wouldn't even know you're being investigated. They just tapped your phone for a while and then stopped, or not, and you would just never find out. It's not like you're going to get a letter in the mail or anything.
Yeah, and this is one of those cases where the Conservatives will pave the road and the Liberals will drive down it. So now that the Liberals find them, maybe they talk to their security advisors and they're like, yeah, actually this bill's super useful. You shouldn't repeal it. And they say, yeah, okay, it's not really like a political liability for us, and people will probably just forget about it. So fuck it, sure.
Yeah, I mean, people definitely didn't like it and still don't. However, I think this is just one of the only important things about it, because right now C-51 hasn't really been going anywhere lately. I still think it's an important issue, and it certainly is one of the sort of signature, I don't know if you call them betrayals, but honest applications of the Trudeau policy.
Yeah.
As of right now, I guess, if you could call him to have a policy. Sort of the, argue against the things people don't like and then do as little as possible about it once in power.
Yep. Yeah, that about sums it up.
But there is another one, and that's pipelines.
Ah.
And that is something people see.
Yeah. And get really pissed off about.
And it keeps happening. Unlike C-51, where you just write the law, you write it into law, and now it's law, and people you never meet go and do stuff. The pipelines have to go through approval processes.
And
there's
they have
meetings,
to get physically built and go through people's backyards.
Stuff has to happen. Constant protests will be occurring.
Yes, Trudeau did approve several pipelines. He did not approve the Northern Gateway, which is good because that was just stupid. But for someone that is self-proclaims as an environmentalist and someone that wants to help stop global warming, he sure has approved a suspicious number of pipelines in spite of that.
Well, he's an environmentalist in the same way that he's a feminist, you see. You just have to look at it right. You have to see when he says he's an environmentalist, what he means is he really loves the environment in principle.
not in practice?
No, the environment works on paper, okay? But out there in the real world, you got to think in other different ways. But the recent one in the States, right? Keystone.
Keystone, yeah.
Which is one of those cases where I think people in Canada were expecting Trudeau to not allow that one, to stop Keystone, because
it was the most notorious.
Yeah, and Trump was officially in favor of it, and the Conservatives were in favor of it, and it seemed like Trudeau and Obama were basically both against it. They both seemed to be really keen on pushing decisions off to some later date.
Kicking the can down the road.
But as it turned out, Obama ran out of room to kick it down the road, and Trudeau now has the situation where, oh, look at that, both sides have approved it, so I guess there's no reason not to.
What I find a little bit perplexing about the new pipelines being approved is that the price of oil hasn't really increased enough for the tar sands to be profitable again. So why are they even investing in this at all?
I don't really understand a lot of the financial considerations. I haven't really read up on any of this sort of stuff. As far as I understand, the goal of a lot of these pipelines is to expand the available market for our tar sands more than anything else.
Yeah,
and
but
so
the price of oil...
There's a glut of tar sand crude that people would be willing to buy, even though it's at quite a low price. And so I guess some money is better than no money.
Okay, here's a question for you. Why is it that the NDP is the only political party that seems to be interested in value-added manufacturing for our raw resources? Not just bitumen, but also, logs, forestry, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Why are the Liberals and Conservatives so keen to export cheap raw resources when we could create manufacturing jobs at home? To me, this seems like a...
Well, because those manufacturing... In the case of oil, the problem is that there's already a surplus of refining capacity in the States. And so the construction of a refinery in Canada would be quite expensive.
But we already have refineries in the Maritimes.
Yeah, but it's cheaper to send it to the States. Anyway.
But the refineries in the Maritimes import oil from Venezuela.
What do you want me to tell you?
I want to know why. It doesn't make any sense.
Capitalism. It makes profits. It doesn't make sense. It makes money. People get put out of work. Well, geez, that's just too damn bad.
Yeah, but we could actually we could have better jobs.
Yeah, that costs money. Where's that money going to come from? Do you think the industry's going to... If the industry wanted a refinery, they would have just built one.
Yeah, so you would need, the state to come in.
Yeah, we would have to do that. And then what? Are we just going to hand that over to the private sector after we build it?
Well, no, we need a democratically planned economy.
Socialist economy.
So that would make more sense. But I guess the liberals and conservatives don't want.
Yes,
the
unfortunately,
state
a democratic socialist planned economy is not part of the liberal or conservative platform. That is a real damn shame. And but you can go to the next convention and try to get them to vote on it.
All right. Well, another controversial point for the Liberal Party has been the continuation and also expansion of the temporary foreign worker program.
Yep.
I think that's why there was a big meeting rally thing event that Trudeau went to with a bunch of, it was focused on young workers. I think it was in Ontario, and a bunch of people in the audience like turned their backs on him, and he got shouted at and heckled by a bunch of the young workers that were like pissed off about the temporary foreign worker program. And Trudeau is more accustomed to just having, taking selfies and having the news take selfies for him and looking good with his, his handsome chiseled chin and his beautiful wife.
And just randomly showing up at weddings and getting photo ops and all that sort of fun stuff.
Yeah.
I'm happy that more and more often it seems that he's getting sandbagged by like just random people who pretend it's, because apparently it's really easy to get him to talk to you if you just pretend to want to take a selfie and then ask him a hard-hitting political question. A few people have already done that. Yeah, the temporary foreign workers program is another one of those sort of thorns in the side of the Liberal Party that sort of, for Trudeau, doesn't really provide him with a nice, easy, photo-friendly thing for him to do.
Yeah.
It's not like, marching in the gay pride parade or anything. There's not a thing that him and his face can do to make him and his party look good when it comes to temporary foreign workers. It's just laws and negotiations and principles. And honestly, I don't think the Liberals are good at any of those.
No, certainly not.
The idea, I mean, okay, first of all, I don't think we're going to really have a lot of disagreement on this issue, really. But I would just like to say, I think it's transparently clear to everyone in Canada that the temporary foreign workers program is not used for the purpose that the government tries to justify it for.
No, I don't think so at all. I know of this coffee shop owner that, is completely... He treats his employees kind of shitty. He doesn't pay them very well, and he's always complaining about how they're not working as hard as he is because he's the business owner. And he goes through all these like young workers, and of course he's paying them like barely minimum wage or just above it, and is constantly wondering like, why can't I get people that just do what I tell them to do and work hard like they care about this business as much as I do.
I pay them minimum wage and they keep putting in minimum effort. I don't get it.
Yeah.
What's going on?
Exactly. And so he was actually considering trying opting in for the temporary foreign worker program because he knows that those, the foreigners that will work harder because they're given this great opportunity to work for minimum wage at a coffee shop. It's like, dude, you just need to pay your workers more. That's literally it.
Maybe a higher minimum wage might work, but apparently that's just that's not a way to solve this problem.
Yeah.
Presumably. But I will say, I mean, the temporary foreign workers program was quite a shit show under the Conservatives. It has been radically scaled back. I mean, it's basically been scaled back. It's no longer a program where you as an employer can just fill out a form to apply for temporary foreign workers. However, this has had the unintended other negative consequence that a lot of people who have been working in Canada for several years now are now being deported, essentially, because the laws have become more restrictive. And so if, say, you were a temporary foreign worker working at a Tim Hortons, you now got to go back to the Philippines to even worse poverty than you were working in here. That's not good either. And I think the NDP or somebody should be fucking clear on this point that if you're good enough to work here, that's it. You're good enough to stay. You're good enough to have it be a citizen. Yeah, fine.
If that should be contingent in this plan, if
it absolutely is not, and that's kind of the whole point.
That's the whole point of the it's in the name, temporary.
Yeah, you're not here to. It's not like you're getting a visa, you're getting a work release, you're doing all this stuff, you're doing things as part of a job or whatever, or you have some kind of process to citizenship. Unlike in the United States, where it's all very illegal and stuff, we found a way to integrate it into our economy so that we just basically give them like a work release program and then send them back to their prison of a country whenever we don't want them anymore.
Yeah, basically. But, I mean, is there actually a labor shortage? I mean, to me...
Well, there's an unemployment problem, too.
Well, to me, it seems that, To me, it seems that like a lot of the jobs that the temporary foreign worker program are filling don't really provide people enough money to have a decent life. You know, you can't buy a house on that kind of wage.
Well, at a certain point,
you can't even
in many
afford
places,
a decent apartment.
You can't afford an apartment, period.
Yeah.
I know actually a person I worked with recently. She's moving back to her hometown because she literally can't afford to live here anymore. She has to move back, and that's it. And it's not even a simple problem of like, oh, my rent was raised, and I got screwed over in some kind of very special sort of way. It's just I'm making this much money, and it costs more to live in this city than I can make at my full-time job.
Yeah.
So I have to move back home. That's it. I can't live in this city anymore. And she has been living here for like 20 years. So it's not just some sudden thing either. So for someone who's, whinging about how they can't find quality, except for high school students who don't have to worry about rent or anything. Well, yeah, exactly. Your business model relies on poverty. It relies on human misery. Why are you so shocked when people are miserable at your work? They're not treating you like some fucking golden god who's just this wonderful person to them.
Yeah.
You're an asshole.
Yeah, you're an asshole, and nobody that works full-time should be poor, period.
Yeah, if you work that would be, to me, that's where the minimum wage should be. I mean, $15 an hour is a good goal.
That's not even a living wage in Victoria, but even so,
sure,
it's still an improvement.
But yeah, the goal would be if you work full-time, you're above the poverty line. Like, that would be that's the whole point. Yeah. Any job, any business owner that says, I can't afford that, any business owner that says, I need temporary foreign workers because of my business model, is basically saying my business model needs poverty.
Yeah.
It relies on poverty. It's not just accidental. It's not just some of the people who work for me happen to be poor. I need it, or else my whole business wouldn't function.
Yeah, and my response to that would be, okay.
Well, yeah, my response is like, well, GTFO. You have no fucking place in a civilized world, essentially.
You suck at capitalism, get out, let someone else do better. Even from a capitalist standpoint.
Sure, that was the classical liberal argument that, in better times, people like Trudeau would be making themselves. They wouldn't need us crazy socialists to do it. Liberals themselves used to make this argument that, unions are good because it forces capitalists to innovate and develop the economy better. Mm-hmm. Because wages are so high, they have to be more efficient. You can't run, a fast food chain with 40 people working at it if they're all getting paid a living wage. You have to modernize the equipment. You have to find efficiencies. You have to be able to produce whatever it is you're selling better, which was supposed to be the whole damn point of capitalism in the first place, that it was capable of doing that kind of thing. It forced solutions to, drudgery work. It introduced efficiencies. And it just is like, well, yeah, but if you pay people shit wages, you don't need to do that. If you find temporary foreign workers, you don't need to do that. You don't need to automate at all. You can just get more people. And since there's more people who are unemployed, eventually, I think, if nothing changes, eventually the whole temporary foreign worker program mentality will just be applied to everyone, whether by a liberal or conservative government, or Trudeau, a future Trudeau, or a future, Stephen Harper.
Yeah, but don't worry. You can just, work at Uber as a driver part-time and make up the extra cash and just, sleep on your friend's couch and rent out your place on Airbnb and then make up the difference there. Because the sharing economy is really the way forward, right, Mac? I fucking hate the sharing economy. I think it's bullshit.
Really? I couldn't quite tell.
Couldn't tell by my sarcasm.
Facetious enough.
Yeah. Well, fuck Uber and fuck Airbnb
and fuck our government that's doing absolutely nothing for working people in the country.
Agreed. Hear, hear.
Yeah. Anyway, however, they're also not doing much for people outside the country either. There's this whole problem with refugees in the States, and Trump has rather infamously banned either Muslims or just banned human beings. Either way, I'm not really too keen on. But either it's racist bigotry or it's just bigotry. In any event, Trudeau, being the enlightened liberal democratic leader that he is, made a rather generous seeming offer, like that anyone who was being kicked out of the country, you can come to Canada, essentially. As it turns out, that was kind of a lie.
Oh, you mean during the Muslim ban?
Yeah. That was kind of a lie when he said it initially, because our quotas had already been filled as far as refugees were concerned.
Okay, but I mean, Trudeau, in his defense, has been a lot more welcoming towards refugees than most other world leaders.
Well, on paper, also, we're very far from them. So we can be as welcoming as we want. And interestingly enough, the argument, somewhat sarcastically, the argument was always, well, of course we're welcoming to refugees because we don't have a border that refugees are streaming across. As it turns out, we now do.
Manitoba.
And we're treating them like shit anyway.
I think most of them are having they're being processed, and I think some of them
in
are
hospitals.
In some cases, I think most of them are going to be accepted, though, won't they?
No,
there's the what's that
because
program?
Of a fancy little thing called the third state.
But it's still unclear if that's actually going to be. Can you, for our listeners that are not familiar with the third state thing, or can you please give a synopsis of it?
Basically, we came to an agreement with the United States and I think several other countries that a refugee is considered a refugee only to the country that they landed in the first place.
No, that they declared refugee status in.
Technically, it's supposed to be landed in, but because of Europe and a bunch of other places, it was seen as unfair because people were landing in Italy and Greece because those were the first fucking countries you'd get to,
right,
and not Germany. And that's why a lot of people wanted to declare in Germany, because then they would get treated a lot better. Much like us, Germany was in a position where they could be much more friendly towards refugees because so few of them were coming. In our case, we follow that rule of the third state policy or law or whatever. Basically what it means is that those refugees that are now being potentially hunted down by Trump's regime or already going to be kicked out, if they try to cross the border north to Canada, we are legally required to just send them back.
Yeah, but I mean,
not legally required, but Trudeau basically agrees with the third state rule and is going to be sending them back officially. Now, you might be right. Maybe we won't. Maybe he'll let them stay. However, I don't really see him as being a particularly, strong-willed person when it comes to these kinds of things. And it seems like once the news dies down on the issue, he'll just quietly send them back to the States to whatever fate awaits them.
Yeah, I mean, from the perspective of a refugee, though, I mean, you wouldn't be safe in the United States. You could very well be deported. And I think but as much as I don't like the Liberal government, there is still some part of me that thinks they might side with the refugees and be like, yeah, you're not going to be treated well there, and you are going to be sent back to Yemen or Somalia or whatever.
I do agree with you. I hope they do that. And it is possible they might. However, the whole principle of the third state law is that if they've declared in America, they can't declare themselves as a refugee in Canada as well. Which means...
unless the United States...
No, they're already supposed to be processed in the States. That's just... doesn't matter. It has nothing to do with how they'll be treated, because America is considered by Canada to be a safe state.
Yeah, but...
Still.
Is it?
It is from the standpoint of the law and the standpoint of the current government. Trudeau considers America to be a safe state. We are in agreement with America on that question, too. We all sort of agree amongst ourselves what safe states are. And
so what you're saying is that Canada would have to officially declare the United States as an unsafe state
for whatever reason
in order to comply with the law.
Yeah, and there's a variety of ways we could do this. Some of them really fucking simple, and some of them more complicated. But ultimately, it would just come down to the same old, the perennial question of would Trudeau stand up to Trump on this issue? And
the answer is obviously
probably not.
Yeah.
I mean, given that he hasn't yet, and given that even some of the people who don't like him are like, well, try to make the best of a bad situation kind of thing. Like, yeah, I guess so, but where does that end, right? If you're going to try to make the best of a bad situation when it comes to Trump, what does that mean when Trump will just keep pushing the bar and he knows that people like Trudeau will just keep backing up?
And, speaking of refugees, I think that it's worth mentioning that, Canada made a really big, PR, the Liberal Party made a big PR deal out of accepting tens of thousands of refugees. And by all means, I support it. I think we should welcome refugees. We should welcome them into our communities, no question about that. But it seems that the but is that there's a really big difference between the government-sponsored refugees and the private-sponsored refugees. And the people, the Syrian refugees that have been sponsored by families and communities have fared much better than the government-sponsored refugees, who don't seem to be getting very much support and only were given a sort of monthly allowance for 1 year. And once that year is done, they're basically on their own.
Well, and can't
only
work.
And only 10% of them, of the government-sponsored refugees, have found work at all.
Well, you're not really supposed to be working in most cases.
Well, I mean, I think they are being encouraged to find work, but there's a lot of barriers, like cultural barriers, and the fact that a lot of their English skills are not very good.
Yeah, well, if they don't speak English or French, then they're kind of...
Well, exactly. I mean, I'd be fucking useless in the Middle East trying to learn Arabic for the first time, so I could not expect any more from anyone else.
You probably just get a job as ESL teacher, but I get your point.
Yeah.
Sure, it's not good, and I guess this is just one of those sort of where austerity kind of butts heads with the grandiose principles of liberalism and of Trudeau.
Yeah.
Where, yeah, it's great. Let's bring them all in. Let's help some people out. Let's save some refugees from a death, right? But we don't have the money for it. We don't have the infrastructure for it. We don't have the systems available for it. We don't have the basically state employees whose job it is to assist people, both not just integrating in like some vague kind of way, but like
just teach them English,
job skills, how the fucking country works, how the laws work, which is also important because in many cases it's not even just a question of like English. You might know English. You might it's probably one of the major reasons why you're able to get out of the country at all. But you might have absolutely no idea how our legal system works, and those are skills that for Canadians, most Canadians don't learn that because to understand that on like on a really personal, visceral level takes years or decades to kind of understand how you can apply for this, or you can get a grant, or you can do this other stuff, and all of that's just invisible to someone who's just suddenly arrived in Canada.
Yeah, and that's the difference between the government-sponsored refugees and the private ones. The privately sponsored refugees do have that sort of grassroots support network there.
Yeah.
There was a group of people that put their money together and said, yeah, we want to help some people out. We will give them housing. We will help teach them English. That network for them was there. But with the government-sponsored refugees, they were given a monthly allowance and a hotel room, and that's basically it. Like, okay, figure it out. You have a house now. Bye. And I think that it underscores a kind of a willingness for the Liberal Party to take credit for being so generous and taking so many more refugees. But then when the actual fact comes down to, well, how are you actually going to support them in their new, roles in society, their new communities, their new whatever, they seem to be completely fucking absent there. There's one more contentious thing that I can think of off the top of my head about Trudeau, and that is his decision to allow U.S. border guards to detain Canadians on Canadian soil at airports.
In this whole podcast has been just a litany of failures and things we don't like about Trudeau, and he's not left-wing enough, or he doesn't like social programs, or he wants to cut services and taxes and ruin the sort of Canada we wish Canada were like. Mm-hmm. But this is one of those things where it seems like this is a purely nationalist kind of argument to this, that a conservative would be really fucking railing against as well, just as easily as a liberal. Like this seems to be something that no true Canadian would allow, kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And for us, evil socialists, it almost seems silly to bring it up. But at the same time, it is an obvious problem because of the impact it has on people's rights. The fact that apparently American border guards can do pre-clearing on Canadian territory. And worse than both of those things is how vague the rules actually are as to, like, at what point can you refuse to be searched?
At what point will I be sent to Guantanamo Bay?
No, but even just you're not going to be sent to Guantanamo Bay, but even the simpler question of at what point am I in American custody?
Yeah.
In like the most basic sense. Like, on what point am I now operating under American laws? And that is not something that this whole new system of pre-clearing and bullshit makes really fucking unclear. Because if you're, say, it doesn't happen very often, and it actually is happening less now. Like, the rate of Canadians that are being refused at the border has actually dramatically decreased in the last month. However, the question still remains as to, like, if I'm at a border and I've got a cell phone and the border officer asks me to unlock my cell phone and I say no, can he arrest me?
And for how long?
And do I go to a Canadian jail or do I go to America? Even having not set foot in America. I've got my passport in my pocket and it hasn't been stamped.
Yeah.
And now I've apparently, become suspicious enough to justify being detained for who knows how long. That kind of shit, it's really creepy, and B, it should have been exactly the one and only thing that, like, any proper bourgeois government doesn't allow.
Yeah.
It shouldn't have to be socialists that say this either.
Oh, well, and it's not either.
No.
I mean, plenty of people in the liberal media and probably even conservatives too are questioning this decision making, and and I wonder why did they do that? Why? For what reason? What do we have to gain out of that other than cozying up to the Americans even more, which is something that we are professionals at anyways. So.
Sure. Well, we are pros at it. We're good at it.
We're the best in the world.
Yeah. Countries that come to us to ask how do you do it so well. I don't know. I don't know if it's going to go anywhere. It might end up being one of the things that gets backpedaled as time goes on. But honestly, it's just more than any of the other stuff. It's just one of those things where I just sort of throw up my hands and go, "What the fuck is going on?" Like, how does this happen? What fucking stupid backroom deal resulted in this new rule?
And why?
Yeah, well, and we may never know. And that's probably one of the most frustrating and irritating things with liberal politicians, is quite often we never find out why.
Okay, well, let's enough about the Liberals. There's 2 leadership debates going on in Canada for the New Democratic Party and for the Conservatives.
The other 2 parties need leaders now that they both lost in different and interesting ways.
Yeah, and I think the Conservative leadership, I haven't been paying attention to it almost at all, but it's almost actually wrapped up, and they're going to have their leadership vote in the next couple of months.
Yeah.
And the NDP doesn't have their vote. It's just getting started. They're not going to do it until October. On the Conservative side, it looks like Kevin O'Leary is in the lead.
Basically, I mean, they're close enough that it's like within the margin of error. You got Kevin O'Leary and Kelly Leitch, and they're both like watered. Between the 2 of them, they would make one whole Donald Trump. They're like if Donald Trump's personality was split in some kind of matter transporter.
Yeah.
On the one hand, you've got Kelly Leitch. That's all of Donald Trump's like racist, bigoted qualities. All of his flippant stupidity, but also all of his sort of
lack of attention to detail,
but also like all of the dog whistle code words for really conservative people to sort of see
Canadian
themselves
values, test for immigrants, etc.
And then on the side of O'Leary, you've got all the showmanship and lying. And utter lack of political experience that also regular people do find at least somewhat endearing.
Yeah.
Because, hey, he's not just another politician.
He's someone new. He can
he's
shake
someone
up
new.
the
Someone
system.
else. He's going to do things differently. So you've got, like, between the 2, the race in the Conservative Party is basically between 2 watered-down versions of Donald Trump and a bunch of other regular conservative assholes who probably won't win. But given
there's like 16 of them.
Yeah, I know. I couldn't even begin to even pretend to tell you who I imagine any of these fucking people's names are. No idea at all.
Nor do I care.
Nah, I don't care. But what is interesting is the number of people I've seen on Facebook and in person even, which is quite odd for this kind of talk, who've suggested like joining the Conservative Party to vote against Kelly Leitch or O'Leary or both. Like,
change the system from within, said the octopus at the sushi restaurant.
Yeah, except in their case, it's always like, yeah, but, usually it's Kelly Leitch because she's definitely the worst of the 2 of them. She's particularly racist. well, we don't want Kelly Leitch to be leader. And I'm like, well, no, I don't. But I also don't want O'Leary to be leader either. I also just don't want the Conservative Party, just in general. And so I'm kind of left going, why the hell would I spend $40 joining the Conservatives to vote? Would probably not matter very much anyway.
And on the other hand, we have the NDP leadership, which is, I think, a little bit more interesting than the Conservative debate.
It's just started.
It has just started, but you have Niki Ashton, and you have Charlie Angus and two other dudes, and
just four now, and possibly more.
Possibly more, but what I think is really interesting is that they're all on the same bandwagon of, yeah, we went way too far to the right last time in the elections. People don't want a second Liberal Party. People do actually, like, the NDP's position, our place in the Canadian political context is to be the left-wing party, and we are not going to allow the Liberals to outflank us on the left, signal left, turn right, as they always do. And the Beaverton put out a funny article, I think yesterday, that was titled "NDP Leadership Contendants Dangerously Close to Disagreeing with One Another."
Yeah.
And the consensus is, yeah, we need to get back to our roots.
To be fair, the NDP leadership races have always been very, friendly. The party's always big on unity.
Even though we're totally not unified.
Yeah, and I think that that's at least worth pointing out, because in the NDP race, it's unique in the sense that the last leader was actually kicked out by the party membership.
Yeah.
This wasn't just a, falling on his sword kind of thing. He didn't want to fall on his sword. He refused to fall on his sword. He was like, nope, everything's fine. This is the second best election result we've ever had.
Even though we were very close to forming government and you completely fucked it up.
Yeah. So Mulcair was all, everything's fine, bed of roses, it's wonderful. As it turned out, the membership didn't think so and kicked him out. And there was no expectation they would do that at the last convention.
Yeah.
However, that's all sort of in the past now. What's interesting is that you've now got a situation where, for the longest time, it seemed like no one wanted to run.
Yeah, well, just the fact that we have 4 people running instead of 16 is, indicative.
Yeah, and because when Mulcair resigned, that was essentially when the leadership race unofficially started. The question of who's going to be the leader suddenly became an issue, and no one wanted to put their hat in first. No one wanted to say so. Everybody was asked. Everyone was like, well, I don't know. Maybe I got to see if anyone's interested. And even now, it feels like all the 4 people who are actually running are still kind of playing at seeing how their message looks on stage, and any one of them might just drop out at any second.
I don't know. I think Niki Ashton is in this for the win.
I think Niki Ashton's not going to stop, but I am still concerned as far as her message goes, that it still seems very... she does seem to equivocate a bit and sort of avoid the basic problem. Nobody has yet to criticize Mulcair, which, isn't important in and of itself, but would signal a seriousness to me.
Yeah, but as you said, the NDP we're always sticklers for unity.
Yeah, but the whole point is that this is different now. Like, things actually are different now. The leader got kicked out by that party that is always for unity. So what do you say to this membership that is apparently willing to shit can a relatively popular politician?
Well, he wasn't relatively popular. He
was personally popular with it. Polls consistently showed him to be popular amongst Canadians. He was a pretty good speaker.
He was a very good speaker. Yeah. He was an exceptional parliamentarian.
Oh yeah, no,
he was just a liberal,
fully fluent in English and French. He had all the check marks you needed, except his politics.
Yeah.
I guess that's where the point comes in, where all these leaders, they're all 4 of them are tacking to the left here during this campaign.
Which is great to see.
Niki Ashton's the one I think is sincere. It's great to see, but I think that there's something really disingenuous about it if none of them actually identify what went wrong and simply appeal to sort of a vague, we went too far to the right, we lost our way, whatever mentality, when it's not we went too far to the right, our leader went too far to the right,
yeah, but
our
I think
MPs went too far to the right. These particular people fucked up our election for these particular political reasons. You want to know why we lost? It's because Mulcair was a liberal. That's why we lost. I want to hear someone say that.
Yeah. Oh, I agree fully, but putting yourself in the mind of Niki Ashton or one of the other contenders, do you want to actually sort of sideline or risk the support of people that might like what you're saying but also supported Mulcair? It is kind of a political liability to be so brazen in these, especially in the early stages of the leadership race.
Sure. No, I mean, like I've said, it's early days here. I mean, who knows? Maybe a couple months from now, they'll all be beating Mulcair like a fucking piñata. That'd be fun to see.
I would love to see that.
I mean, that is, as opposed to now where he's just been like taken out back and shot and no one speaks of this.
Basically, yeah.
Yeah, but that's what's going on now. And it all seems kind of like, we murdered someone's political career and we don't want to talk about it. Basically, like no one really wants to speak of him anymore. What happened in the past was bad, and there will be appeals to
stays in the past.
Yeah,
it's all water under the bridge. Jack Layton has been mentioned several times.
Yeah, and Mulcair hasn't been mentioned at all.
Not once. No one speaks of him.
No, and I mean, to be honest, I don't like Jack Layton either. I think I have disagreements. I mean, I think that the way in which he structured the party under his leadership basically led us to where we are. Like, not just the successes, but also the defeats. It led us to a situation where the party was sort of forced into a situation where it divested itself of political disputes in order to grasp for power.
Parliamentary power.
Yeah, and that's where we are now, where we're now sort of in the ruins of that plan. And so if no one's willing to undo that, if no one's willing to bring up that debate, I mean, if the membership of the party is really that disinterested in contentious politics, then we're just going to lose anyway.
Yeah, eventually, you're not going to make progress unless you're stepping on someone's toes.
Well, not just that, but I mean, even just internally, like the ability to debate ideas in the party. Instead disagree with people.
Yeah.
The fact that you can make fun of it and be like, the NDP just, we almost accidentally disagreed. Well, better not. Yeah. Like, that's actually
true. A problem.
But that is a problem. That's a serious problem. And I'd say it's a problem, generally speaking, on the left, just in general. Like, that there's a problem where the desire for unity, the desire for sort of a defensiveness of like, let's just sort of, pull ranks and just come together and just sort of hold out. It works for a time and it's good when you're under attack, but when the situation is sort of, when the opposite happens, when there's opportunities to
implement those ideas.
Yeah, to debate, to expand.
What ideas do you implement?
Exactly. When you're looking at the next election, and we will eventually, what are we going to say that's not going to be what we said in 2015?
Well, what you were saying about, the left in general capitulating to this sort of behavior, I think it's because it's way more easy for the right wing to unify. They have their own debates on whether or not we should protest abortion or same-sex marriage or these social issues, but when it comes to like the old school economic issues, they can pull rank fucking easy. They defend capitalism, they defend the corporations, they defend the interests of the bourgeoisie, right? But for us on the left, we're always, we can agree on the fact that, the system is not working very well. We're not unified. We want change, but what actually is that change? So it's easiest for us to unite on a sort of, face value level where we all agree that the system as it stands right now is wrong. But when it comes down to the actual nitty gritty of figuring out, well, what is the world that we want to live in? What changes do we actually want to make? That's when the divisions really show themselves. Yeah. And I think in the context of the NDP leadership debate is that like those are the questions that are difficult to bring up because as a party leader, you want to show a sort of, you want to unify the party. You want to bring everyone together. That's that signifies a good leader. And so I don't disagree with you, but I do think these disagreements need to be had, these debates need to be had, these ideas need to be debated, but they're difficult to bring up when you do have a pretty unified right, and we do need a more unified left, and this is just kind of the default easy way to do that.
I guess so. However, I mean, on the one hand, I do agree with you. The right wing is sort of the right is the default establishment of whatever. Capitalism is the system we have, therefore it's just a fact, and therefore that unifies people. At the end of the day, if you all agree on what capitalism is, then you always have some sort of fallback unifying purpose. And that is certainly true of the Conservatives and Liberals. When it comes to the NDP, yeah, you're right. There is no real agreement on what capitalism is, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, what we should do about it, what that thing we should do about it even looks like. Every one of those steps is a potential major division, like a huge one. Like, this is the entire economy, right? And every step of the way, the NDP is kind of like, well, I don't know, socialism, not social democracy, democratic, or blah, blah, blah. Every single point, there's a point to disagree on, and I agree. However, when it comes to someone like Niki Ashton, who's as far as I understand, some kind of socialist, right? I mean, what does it mean for her to win if that never gets brought up?
Well, I do like that the very first words during the first debate that happened was Niki Ashton saying, like, giving her introduction, saying, I am a democratic socialist. I am so happy that even those words were said at all during an NDP leadership debate. That is not the kind of rhetoric or words that would even be thought of. No one would think to say that during, in 2012 during the last leadership debate.
So Niki Ashton's a socialist, and the question of like unifying the party is the issue. However, I'm happy to say, I'm happy to say that a majority of the membership of the NDP aren't socialists, or maybe even wouldn't self-describe as socialists. Even social democrats, progressives, like there are a variety of political views in the party, and certainly not revolutionary socialists who want to overthrow capitalism or anything like that, or think that that's a necessary thing. However, that's exactly the problem. I mean, the problem is convincing people in the party membership of the correctness of your ideas, and I think the only way to do that is to boldly state them.
Yeah.
Even in a leadership campaign. Even if she were to lose, I think that would be the right thing to do.
Well, it would lay the groundwork for a future.
Sure. Niki Ashton winning would be great. But if she wins on like a unified, if she won, it would be, we're going to become more left-wing again. But inevitably, unity reigns supreme. And that would mean, backing down on a lot of these issues, a lot of the principles that are at the core of democratic socialism. It would mean dovetailing all that stuff back into the party and saying, well, the Canadian people, the NDP is not the Canadian people, and we need to govern for everyone, which means some vague nonsense. If you start with a clear and perhaps even off-putting message at times, I don't think it needs to be, but, if that's what it takes, it does provide someone in her position with a
mandate.
A mandate to be a socialist prime minister, to be a socialist leader of a party, for the NDP to be a socialist party.
Yeah, and I think if we're talking about, like you were saying, that, well, most members of the NDP might not self-identify as socialist in name. If you were to ask them, and in fact, if you were to ask most people in Canada, should we have free post-secondary education? Should we continue to have free healthcare? Should we have a jobs program? Should we have a housing program? Should we do all these things that are good? People would agree with that.
Yeah.
And
the question then is, well, okay, how? How do we do that?
Socialism is how. On the other hand, at this point, there's not a lot to differentiate the different candidates from one another anyways.
No, sure.
And so they might need to tack to the left.
I'm imagining the ideal sort of scenario here. But as things currently stand, what you're looking at is all of them have tacked to the left. to the point where it's actually kind of amusing how hard it is to tell them apart, because they're all on the one hand very careful about not really criticizing previous leaders, but they're all clearly like, our past policies were too right wing, and we need to get back to basics and back to what the NDP really where we matter and have a purpose, and that means, you know, crazy left wing policies like, you know, free education and an effectively funded healthcare system, you know, that kind of stuff. And within all of that, that's great. And so if you have, say, any one of these four leaders get elected currently, or whoever happens to be running in the future, any of them get elected, they're going to be facing a membership that's basically going to be holding them to task more, and they're going to be having run on a much more left-wing platform, and will be obliged on the basis of that to sort of be forced into a left-wing position, effectively. Like the left, the NDP went hard, well, not hard to the left, but went surprisingly to the left at the last convention, kicking out Mulcair, voting in favor of the Leap Manifesto, that sort of stuff. And so now anyone who runs the party is now going to have to contend with that one way or another. And that left-wing sentiment in the party membership will inevitably have to be reflected through whoever the leader is. Now, I think at this point, whoever the leader is will probably try to channel that into more conventional parliamentary shenanigans. But who knows? Maybe this will cause people to get even more irritated in the future.
Well, Niki Ashton has said quite openly that she wants the NDP to be more active, more mobilized, more involved with social movements. And I think this is a really good development, because the NDP for so many decades now has sort of put itself squarely in the battlefield of parliamentary politics, and that's it. Yep. We've kind of abandoned the labor organizing, being involved with protest, organizing events, organizing anything. And so I think that just the fact that Niki Ashton has come out in favor of wanting, just seeing the NDP in a different light in that sense, seeing the NDP as an organization that can mobilize people, that can mobilize students, that can mobilize, you know, the oppressed and help each other out, and to actually do something outside of the sphere of just running in the first past the post electoral system, I think is really good. Even if she's not coming out swinging saying, oh, we need to nationalize the commanding heights of the economy and put them under democratic workers' control, you know, maybe just getting the NDP more involved in social movements is a good step, beginner's baby step towards that end goal.
Sure. I think activists need a political party, and I think the NDP needs activists.
Yeah.
So there's definitely a not just from an opportunistic standpoint, but like an actual organic
what do
reason.
Working people need?
Yeah, what do we need? What do we want? Political parties, and I think it's rather one of the more unfortunate things that has happened to activists in the recent past.
That there's no political
there's no party. It's just it's issue-based. You know, every single one of the issues we criticized Trudeau for, there has been an activist movement fighting him over. Mm-hmm. You know, the pipelines are a big one. C-51, marijuana. Every one of those things has activists and organizations and nonprofits fighting to try to get the better solution or whatever. And by and large, they've all failed.
And there's no political party
and there's no party to bring that together as some kind of coherent, principled, you know, here's the common ground we have, here's what we want, here's the actual reasons why this is why these things are important. And I think that unless that happens, I mean, I think eventually it will happen, but until it happens, we'll keep getting people like Trudeau who appeal to unity and stability and just keeping things as they were forever and hoping, praying just that nothing bad happens, that we don't have to do the awful conservative austerity stuff, because we will do it, but we'll be very unhappy when we do it.
Well, since this is a podcast about Trudeau, I have one final thing to say to him.
Mm-hmm. To Trudeau, because he is such a fucking narcissist, he will listen to anything that has his name on it. Is that the idea?
I hope so. I hope he's listening, because for the rest of my life, will be disappointed in the fact that he skipped on going to Fidel Castro's funeral, and I think that his father, Pierre Trudeau, would be fucking ashamed of him, and that's really all I have to say.
You know, I agree with you, but I think it's, you know, the son is definitely the inferior of the father in this case. And I don't just mean that in some kind of like, oh, Trudeau was just a bigger, greater man. But in many ways, they both represented the sort of liberalism in their own times.
Yeah, I agree.
And it seems like it's that liberalism that's just weak and pathetic and spineless compared to what it used to be. And I don't much care for what it used to be either. But at least back in the good old days, you could appeal to something worth fighting for. And now with Trudeau and the Liberal Party, you know, ignoring my own political positions, looking at them, I don't know what that thing is anymore.
What are they appealing to?
I don't think there is anything worth fighting for.
Just vestiges of the past?
Yeah, just his last name, the memory of his father, the fact that we all hated Harper, the fact that we're afraid of Trump. But it's all fear and nostalgia and not much else.
There's no appeal to something greater.
No. And there's no progress in liberalism anymore.